Napoleonic War Part 2. 1809. War of the Fifth Coalition. Britain's involvement in the Peninsular War in Spain and Portugal led to the formation of the Fifth Coalition, 1809, between Britain and Austria against France. A significant battlefront against Napoleon's allies was the water. Prior to Austerlitz, Austria, a former ally of France, used the occasion to make an attempt to reclaim its imperial possessions in Germany. The Royal Navy had a string of successes in the French colonies during the Fifth Coalition era. Confrontations of Rossinn, Eckmühl, Raab, Aspern-Essling, and Battle of Wagram were among the significant ground battles. The Fifth Coalition made few significant military attempts on land. One of these, the Walcheren expedition of 1809, saw the British Army and Royal Navy working together to assist Austrian forces that were being heavily pressured by the French. After the army commander, John Pitt, 2nd Earl of Chatham, failed to take the target, the naval base at French-controlled Antwerp, the conflict came to a disastrous conclusion. With the exception of the Iberian Peninsula, British military operations on land during the Fifth Coalition were mostly limited to hit-and-run operations carried out by the Royal Navy. This was because the Royal Navy dominated the sea after routing almost all significant naval opposition from France and its allies and blockading what was left of France's naval forces in heavily fortified French-controlled ports. The Treaty of Schönbrunn put an end to the Fifth Coalition War, the 14th of October 1809. Only the Tyrolese rebels under the leadership of Andreas Hofer fought the French Bavarian army in the east until they were ultimately routed in November 1809. The Peninsular War went on in the west. Britain and France continued to wage economic warfare as the British maintained a naval blockade on French-controlled territories. Numerous breaches of the continental system occurred as a result of military shortages and a lack of organization in French territory. And the French continental system was mainly unsuccessful and caused little economic harm to Great Britain. To impose their siege, both sides got into more battles. Napoleon attacked Spain and Russia after realizing that there was a lot of trade passing through them. In the War of 1812, the British battled the Americans, 1812 to 1815. The French Empire expanded to its furthest extent in 1810. Napoleon married Marie-Louise, an Austrian archduchess, to cement a more solid relationship with Austria and provide an heir for the emperor. Napoleon ruled over the Swiss Confederation, the Rhine Confederation, the Duchy of Warsaw, and the Kingdom of Italy in addition to the French Empire. Territories that supported France included the Danish Kingdom, the Kingdom of Spain, ruled by Napoleon's older brother Joseph Bonaparte, Jérôme Bonaparte, Napoleon's younger brother, the Kingdom of Westphalia, the Principality of Lucca and Piombino, ruled by Napoleon's sister Elisa Bonaparte and her husband Felice Bacciochi. The Kingdom of Naples, ruled by Joachim Murat, Caroline's brother-in-law, and Napoleon's erstwhile adversaries, Sweden, Prussia, and Austria. 1812 Invasion of Russia. Napoleon invaded Russia in 1812 at the height of his power with a 450,000-strong pan-European Grande Armée, 200,000 Frenchmen, and many soldiers of allies or subject areas. On June 24, 1812, French soldiers crossed the Niemen River. Napoleon declared a Second Polish War, while Russia declared a patriotic war. Nearly 100,000 Poles joined the invading army, but contrary to their expectations, Napoleon avoided making any concessions to Poland in favor of future talks with Russia. The Grande Armée marched across Russia, winning the crucial Battle of Smolensk on August 16–18 as well as several comparatively minor encounters. In the same days, the right wing of the Russian army, commanded by General Peter Wittgenstein, defeated a portion of the French army under Marshal Nicolas Oudinot in the Battle of Polotsk. As a result, the French were unable to advance on the Russian capital of St. Petersburg. Instead, the outcome of the invasion was decided in Moscow, where Napoleon personally oversaw his soldiers. The Grande Armée was harassed by Russia's scorched earth strategy and light Cossack cavalry. In response, the Grande Armée did not change its operating strategies. This was the major cause of the Grande Army's main column's losses, which in one instance totaled 95,000 soldiers in a week, including deserters. In the Moscow area, with more than 250,000 participants and at least 70,000 losses, the conflict was the greatest and bloodiest single-day combat of the Napoleonic Wars. The French managed to take control of the key battlefield locations, but they were unable to defeat the Russian army. French casualties, unlike Russian ones, could not be replaced due to logistical issues. On September 14, Napoleon marched into Moscow, following yet another Russian army withdrawal. By that point, the Russians had mostly left the city and had let convicts out of jail to annoy the French. The governor, Count Fyodor Rostopchin, gave the order to burn the city down. Napoleon tried to negotiate a peace treaty, but Alexander I refused to submit. Napoleon started the catastrophic Great Retreat from Moscow in October, when there was still no obvious indication of success. The French attempted to get to Kaluga during the Battle of Maloyaroslavets so they could obtain food and foraging supplies. Napoleon was obliged to return the same route he had arrived in Moscow, through the severely devastated districts along the Smolensk road, when the resupplied Russian army blocked the path. The Russian winter, a severe supply shortage, and ongoing guerrilla fighting by Russian peasants and irregular forces handed the Grande Armée a fatal blow during the ensuing weeks. Only 27,000 healthy troops remained when the remains of Napoleon's army crossed the Berezina River in November. 380,000 men were either dead or missing, and 100,000 had been taken. Following his departure from his soldiers, Napoleon went back to Paris to set up the defense against the approaching Russians. When the final enemy forces departed Russia on December 14, 1812, the campaign was practically over. Despite losing some 210,000 soldiers, the Russians quickly restocked their army thanks to their shorter supply routes. Only 2 troops from the Grande Armée would survive the war in Russia for every 12 who entered the country. The opportunity presented by Napoleon's historic loss led Prussia, Sweden, Austria, and a number of other German powers to switch sides and join Russia. The United Kingdom, and other opponents of Napoleon in the War of the Sixth Coalition, 1812–1814. Napoleon soon increased his forces in the east from 30,000 to 130,000 and finally to 400,000, making good on his promise to raise a new army as large as the one he had sent into Russia. The Allies suffered 40,000 losses from Napoleon at Bautzen and Lutzen, the 2nd of May 1813. The 20th to the 21st of May 1813. The 2 fights were among the biggest of the wars thus far, involving armies totaling over 250,000. In November 1813, Metternich presented Napoleon with the Frankfurt Propositions. Napoleon would be permitted to continue as emperor, but France would lose control of the majority of Italy, Germany, and the Netherlands and be limited to its natural bounds. Napoleon rejected the proposals because he still believed he would win the wars. Napoleon did agree to the Frankfurt suggestions by 1814, when the Allies were closing in on Paris, but it was too late, and he rejected the new, more stringent conditions. Arthur Wellesley, 1st Duke of Wellington, continued the Anglo-Portuguese push into Spain during the Peninsular War shortly after the start of the year in 1812. Besieging and conquering the fortified towns of Ciudad Rodrigo, Badajoz, and Salamanca, which was a damaging defeat of the French. The Anglo-Portuguese reached Madrid and proceeded toward Burgos while the French recovered, but as fresh French forces threatened to trap them, they withdrew all the way to Portugal. The French were compelled by the Salamanca campaign to terminate their protracted siege of Cadiz and to permanently withdraw from the provinces of Andalusia and Asturias. Napoleon was able to increase the imperial forces in the area to around 650,000, but only 250,000 of those were directly under his command. The remaining 120,000 were under Nicolas Charles Oudinot, and the other 30,000 were under Davout. The Confederation of the Rhine, particularly Saxony and Bavaria, provided the majority of the remaining imperial armies. In addition, 100,000 armed soldiers were present in the Kingdom of Italy under Eugene de Beauharnais and the Kingdom of Naples under Murat to the south. After the ceasefire, Napoleon appeared to have recovered the upper hand at Dresden, August 1813. When he once more destroyed a coalition army that possessed a numerical advantage and inflicted severe casualties while suffering comparatively few himself. Any advantage that this victory would have given him was lost due to the ineffectiveness of his marshals and his own tardy return to the offensive. 191,000 French soldiers battled more than 300,000 allies in the Battle of Leipzig in Saxony, the 16th to the 19th of October 1813. Widely known as the Battle of the Nations, and the victorious French were forced to retire into France. Denmark-Norway, Napoleon's only surviving ally, succumbed to the alliance when the French withdrew from Germany. Following that, Napoleon fought a number of engagements in France, notably the Battle of Arcus-sur-Aube, but the overwhelming might of the Allies gradually drove him back. Paris was invaded by the Allies on March 30, 1814. During this period, Napoleon engaged in his 6 days campaign, winning several engagements against the hostile armies moving closer to Paris. He was never able to deploy more than 70,000 men during the whole fight against more than 500,000 coalition soldiers. The Allies pledged to keep the coalition together until Napoleon's complete defeat at the Treaty of Chaumont, the 9th of March 1814. Napoleon, who is still unable to comprehend his downfall from power, is adamant about continuing the war. Napoleon had ordered 900,000 new recruits for the battle. But only a small portion of them showed up, and Napoleon's plans for victory gradually gave way to the realization of his helpless predicament. On April 6, Napoleon renounced power. Early in 1814, there were still sporadic military operations in Holland, Spain, and Italy. On April 23, 1814, an armistice was agreed upon with the Allied powers. The War of the Sixth Coalition was finally put to a conclusion by the First Treaty of Paris, which was signed on May 30, 1814. Napoleon was banished to the island of Elba by the winners, who also reinstated the French Bourbon monarchy under Louis XVIII. They convened the Congress of Vienna to rebuild the map of Europe and sign the Treaty of Fontainebleau on April 11, 1814.